You will disappear from this house very soon, Evelyn.
Sam?
You will disappear from this house very soon, Evelyn. Just the way Sam disappeared. Sierra said each word sharp and cold like a blade. The air in the kitchen froze instantly. Sam, the name no one had dared to speak for years, was suddenly uttered by Sierra as if it were a curse. Evelyn felt the tiles beneath her feet sink away. Her daughter, lost in a night filled with unanswered questions, was now being dragged out as a weapon to threaten the mother who still mourned her. But what chilled Evelyn more than Sierra's words was the look in her eyes, calm, confident, as if she knew something Evelyn never did. In that moment, Evelyn felt a shiver of certainty Sierra didn't just want her out of the house. She knew what happened to Sam. And worse, someone else, a shadow lurking at the edge of everything, had been watching from the beginning. When that person steps forward, the entire truth about Sam won't just be revealed. It will tear through the lives inside this home like a storm. Thank you for taking the time to watch this meaningful story. It shows how deeply thoughtful you are. Let me know which state you're watching from in the comments below. I am Evelyn Carter, 68 years old, a dark-skinned African-American woman living in Michigan in the house my husband and I built with our own hands more than 40 years ago. This home was once filled with laughter, warmth, and the sound of Sam sitting at the dining table every morning, doodling on napkins and telling me about her strange dreams. But ever since Sam disappeared, the colors in this place have faded, leaving only fragments of memories that ache every time I touch them, pulling me back into that final night. This morning, when the pale sunlight slipped through the old curtains, I brushed a thin layer of dust off the cabinet and instinctively looked at the wall beside it. There was still a faint handprint there, small but unmistakably present, like a reminder that refuses to die. Sam's handprint. I pressed my palm against it. It was much smaller than mine, just like always. My fingertips trembled as I whispered the question I've asked thousands of times. Sam, where are you? I still can't let go. I turned and my eyes fell on the empty chair where Sam used to sit. After all these years, I've never moved it, never changed its direction or shifted it an inch. I'm afraid that if I touched it, the memories would slip away the same way Sam slipped out of my life suddenly, without explanation. This morning, the chair felt different somehow, or maybe it was just my uneasy heart, but the emptiness seemed to be staring back at me, holding something I hadn't yet understood. At noon, I walked into my bedroom and opened the wooden box I keep hidden in the drawer by my bed. Inside were the last pieces of Sam I had left. A bracelet she made by hand, a photo of the two of us at the beach when she was little, a torn piece of paper with her handwriting so familiar it twisted something deep in my chest. I opened this box every night as if touching these items might bring her back, smiling brightly and calling me with that soft, clear voice. Today was no different, but as I closed the lid, I heard myself whisper, my voice weak but fierce in a way I hadn't felt in years. This time, I won't let anyone take anything else from me. The door clicked open, making me flinch. Caleb walked in, exhausted from another long day. He looked at me briefly before hanging his coat and muttering a few routine phrases. I've gotten used to this. Ever since he married Sierra, the time he spends with me has dwindled, but I've never blamed him. I smiled at him, trying to hide the redness in my eyes. He saw it, but didn't ask. He never asks. He's afraid mentioning Sam will hurt me. He doesn't know that the pain has never left me, not for a single second. As Caleb stepped into the living room, Sierra appeared right behind him, her eyes cold, looking me up and down as if I were an obstacle in the very house I built. In that moment, the air shifted. Something in the way she looked at me sent a chill along my spine. It wasn't simple annoyance. It was calculation, quiet, sharp, observing every step I made, every breath I took. I greeted Sierra, but she didn't answer. She only gave a thin smile, one without any warmth. And in that brief instant, I realized everything was about to change. The way she looked at me wasn't the way a daughter-in-law looks at a mother-in-law. It was the way someone measures a threat they intend to remove. That evening, when I opened Sam's keepsake box again to ease my restless heart, I found something I had never seen before. A small piece of paper wedged tightly against the bottom of the box, hidden so well I must have missed it for years. Sam's handwriting, a strange number and a few rushed words that made my pulse stop. Someone had contacted Sam, someone I never knew about. Someone who might be the last thread of truth about the night Sam disappeared. I stared at the note, my palm growing cold. Only one thought echoed inside me. This isn't over. It has never been over. I always thought the first changes in this house would come from time, not from someone living under the same roof as me. But everything began quietly, subtly, with a kind of possession that crept in like a shadow. Just a few days after I discovered the strange note in Sam's keepsake box, I realized Sierra had already begun to plant her mark on every corner, every object, every breath in this home. That morning, I stepped into the living room and froze. The curtains my husband and I chose when we first built this house, the deep blue ones Sam used to hide behind when she played her silly games, were gone. In their place hung a pale beige curtain, cold and foreign, nothing belonging to my family. I looked around and noticed my old set of dishes had been replaced too. The porcelain bowls with tiny floral patterns that I'd used for decades had been stuffed into a cardboard box near the back door. On the wall, the painting Sam and I made together when she was 10 had been taken down and replaced with an abstract print I'd never seen. Sierra walked out of the kitchen holding her phone, perfectly calm, as if those things had never belonged to anyone. When she caught my gaze, she smiled with half her mouth and said, "The house feels a little old, Mom." Those words lingered in my chest. This house wasn't old. It was full of memories, full of love, full of things Sierra could never understand and never cared to understand. Later that afternoon, while I was putting away Sam's box of keepsakes, I found Sierra cleaning out the storage room. She opened each box, inspecting every item, setting things aside as if they were trash. In the corner, I saw several boxes labeled with Sam's name, now stacked and pushed toward the basement door. I wanted to say something, wanted to stop her, but the words stuck in my throat. Sierra glanced at me and said, "I'm moving these old things downstairs so we have more space." That word old made something inside me curl up in pain. Those things weren't old. They were what remained of Sam, the pieces I clung to when the grief became too heavy to swallow. That evening, I turned on the TV to rewatch an old movie Sam loved. Just when I felt myself relax a little, Sierra walked by and switched it off without asking. She put a hand on her stomach and said, "The baby needs quiet." I stared at the blank screen, then watched her walk away. I knew it wasn't about the noise. It was another way to push me further aside, another sign she was claiming this house inch by inch. I sat in silence for a while before whispering, "I'll try not to disturb anything." My voice was so faint, I wasn't sure anyone heard it. Caleb came home late that night. When I mentioned the changes Sierra had made, he rubbed his forehead exhausted and said, "Mom, Sierra's pregnant. Please help her out a little, okay? I just don't want the house to feel tense." I looked at him, my heart sinking. Caleb hated conflict, and somehow his fear of it always pushed me deeper into the shadows. I didn't blame him, but I could feel my place in this house slipping away. The next morning, I went to the kitchen to make tea. On the table, Sam's belongings were scattered and out of order. I bent down to gather them, my hands trembling with a mixture of anger and dread. I put everything back slowly, carefully, then carried a few items upstairs to keep safe. As I passed through the living room, I saw Sierra standing by the trash bin, glancing around as if confirming no one was watching. Then she dropped something in. She turned away quickly, but I walked closer. Inside the trash bin was a photograph of Sam, bent at the corner, lightly torn, as if someone had crushed it before throwing it away. I stood motionless. My chest tightened so hard it felt like something was collapsing inside me. My breath caught somewhere deep in my throat, refusing to move. The room felt smaller. I could hear my own heartbeat too clearly. Sierra looked at me with no sign of regret. In that moment, I understood something far clearer than before. What Sierra was doing had nothing to do with redecorating. She was taking over the house, and she wanted to erase every trace of Sam. I picked up the photo, my hand trembling beyond control. But beneath the fear, beneath the shock, something else began to stir, something I had buried for far too long. A sharp, undeniable instinct rose inside me. Sierra knows more than she lets on. And whatever this battle is, it's only just beginning. I no longer remember how that morning began, only the feeling of the kitchen turning heavy, as if every breath pressed back into my chest. Ever since I found Sam's photo tossed into the trash, my mind had been bracing for something worse, and it came faster than I expected. Everything started with Sierra's footsteps behind me, soft but echoing with a silent challenge. I was washing my old dishes when she stepped into the doorway, blocking the exit. I felt her presence before she even spoke, like a shadow stretching across the kitchen floor. She didn't say anything at first, just stood there, forcing me to look up. Her silence wasn't the silence of someone avoiding conflict. It was the silence of someone in control, someone waiting for me to understand my place. I set the dish down, trying to steady myself. But before I could speak, Sierra opened her mouth, her voice cold and heavy, like stone hitting tile. She stared straight into my eyes, without the softness one might expect from a woman about to become a mother. Then, very deliberately, she asked, "You still keep all of Sam's old things?" My heartbeat stumbled. It was the first time Sierra mentioned Sam without hesitation. In this house, Sam was a forbidden subject, something never spoken aloud unless it was by me. Caleb avoided it out of fear of hurting me, but Sierra said Sam's name as if it were a tool she planned to use. I kept my voice steady. "You don't have to concern yourself with that." She shrugged, but the faint curl of her lips told me she felt victorious. "Old things just clutter the house," she said, calm but sharp enough that I could feel the danger beneath her tone. The door creaked behind us. Caleb stood there surprised and exhausted. He looked at both of us, sensed something wrong, but didn't step in. He was always caught in the middle, too afraid of choosing a side, or perhaps too afraid of choosing the wrong one. I sighed and tried to walk past Sierra to keep washing, but she didn't move. She stood firmly in the way, a deliberate barrier, pushing me into the tight corner of the kitchen. I felt the cold edge of the counter against my back. That was when I realized Sierra was escalating this on purpose. Caleb stayed at the doorway, hand resting on the wooden frame, neither entering nor leaving. A strange silence swallowed the room. Then Sierra stepped closer, one slow step at a time, making sure I felt her dominance. I lifted my chin, struggling to breathe normally. She leaned in, her voice low enough for only me to hear, but cold enough to freeze the air around us. "You'll be gone from this house soon, Evelyn, the same way Sam disappeared." It felt as though the ground cracked beneath my feet. Those words, each one dropping heavily, sliced into me like a blade reopening a wound that never healed. I trembled, gripping the counter to stay upright. What are you talking about?" My voice broke, a sound lost between shock and grief. Sierra straightened, looking at me with a cold confidence, no remorse, no hesitation. Then she said slowly, choosing every word like a strike, "I know more than you think." Caleb took a step forward, alarmed, but still said nothing. His eyes darted between us, confused and frightened. He didn't understand what Sierra had just revealed. Or maybe he did, but didn't want to believe it. I looked at Sierra, and behind her I saw a darkness that had been there all along. From that sentence alone, I knew with terrifying clarity that Sierra knew something about the night Sam vanished. Not just a rumor, not just a detail. She knew something real, something dangerous. Sierra turned and walked away, leaving me standing there with a heart that felt like it had flipped inside my chest. The kitchen was silent again, but it was the kind of silence that vibrated with dread. I pressed my hand against my chest, struggling to breathe. Only one thought pulsed through my mind, echoing louder and louder. Sierra didn't say that by accident. She knows what happened to Sam. And this was only the beginning. Ever since Sierra said that cruel sentence to me, my mind felt as if someone had pulled me backward into those years filled with shadows and unanswered questions. For so long, I convinced myself that Sam had left this world in a night full of mystery that I simply could not change. But Sierra's words cracked that belief open. She didn't just know about Sam. She chose to say it deliberately, as though she wanted to stir something buried. And it suffocated me until I knew I had to open the things I'd sworn I would never touch again. That night, when the whole house was quiet, I walked into my bedroom and pulled the wooden chest from under the bed. Inside were the things I had hidden, not because I forgot, but because remembering felt like bleeding. My hands trembled as I opened the lid. Buried beneath Sam's belongings, the brown diary she had kept lay still, as though it had been waiting for me. I held it for a long time, running my fingers over the worn cover. I hadn't had the courage to read it in years. But tonight, Sierra had pushed me to a place where I could no longer avoid the truth. When I opened the diary, the first page still carried Sam's soft handwriting, stories about ordinary days, small details of a peaceful life she once had. I flipped to the next page, then the next, but near the end, my heart dropped. A page had been torn out, ripped at the edges, the tear still jagged, and that page written on the date Sam disappeared. I sat down on the bed, my heartbeat pounding so hard it hurt behind my eyes. I never tore anything from Sam's diary. Someone else had. Someone had read it. Someone knew what happened that night. I heard footsteps in the hallway. Before I could hide the diary, Sierra pushed open the door without knocking. Her eyes immediately landed on the diary in my hands, and her lips twitched just slightly before she said, "You shouldn't bring those things back up. The past should stay dead." Those words, "stay dead," burned through me. She spoke about Sam like she was nothing but clutter, something outdated, something disposable. I clutched the diary to my chest, unable to say anything, because if I spoke, then I would break. When Sierra left, Caleb came in right after, confusion on his face. He must have overheard her voice. He looked at me, searching my expression. I forced myself to ask the question I'd been holding in my throat for years. "Caleb, Has Sierra ever asked you anything about Sam?" He hesitated, then exhaled. "Yeah, she did ask. Quite a lot, actually. But I thought she was just curious." I could feel my heart sinking. Sierra wasn't curious. Sierra was digging, hunting, looking for something. Before I could stop it, the tears came. They burst out of me in a way I hadn't allowed for years. I curled forward, holding the diary to my chest, sobbing like someone whose soul had been torn apart. "Sam, I'm sorry. I should have protected you." Those words dragged me back into the version of myself I always feared, a mother who failed. Caleb stood helplessly beside me, his hand hovering, shaking. He wanted to comfort me, but didn't know how. He just whispered, "Mom, please don't do this." But he couldn't understand the depth of the pain I carried. I wiped my face and tried to steady my breath. When I gathered Sam's things again, a small piece of paper slipped out and fell to the floor. I bent down to pick it up. On it were 3 hurried words in Sam's handwriting. "He knows." No name, no date, no explanation, just those words. My heartbeat sped up. Who did Sam trust enough to write that about, and who was he? I turned the paper over. There was a faint crease near the edge. I unfolded it, and beneath that fold was something I never expected to find. A series of numbers written with a shaky hand, the handwriting uneven, as if Sam had been frightened when she wrote it. A phone number. I stared at it, my palms growing cold. This was no coincidence. Sam hid it, and someone contacted her right before she vanished. In that moment, I knew I had touched the edge of a truth I might not be ready for. But I also knew something far more important. I had to call that number, no matter what waited for me on the other side. Ever since I found that phone number hidden among Sam's things, I haven't been able to sleep. The thought that someone out there knew something about my daughter's final hours, something I had never been able to reach, kept pressing on my chest like a storm waiting outside the door. I picked up the phone, then put it down again. I wanted to call, but I was terrified of what would happen once that connection formed. Terrified that nothing in my life would ever be the same. That night, I must have drifted into a shallow sleep, because when the clock hit exactly 1:33 a.m., the phone beside my bed began to vibrate violently. I jolted upright, heart pounding like someone had dragged me up from deep water. The screen lit up with an unfamiliar number, the same number written in Sam's trembling handwriting. A chill ran through me. My hand shook as I picked up the phone with both hands, afraid it might slip from my fingers again. I hesitated for one breath before sliding my thumb across the screen. The first sound I heard wasn't a voice, but the hiss of wind passing through an empty space. And then a man's voice, rough, tired, weighted with years of keeping something buried. He spoke slowly, each word deliberate. "I know the truth about Sam." I was so stunned I dropped the phone into the blankets, my heart crashing against my ribs. I fumbled for the device, hands trembling so hard my fingers missed the screen twice. When I finally got it back to my ear, the man was still there, as if he were speaking from inside my room. I don't understand," I managed, my voice breaking. He responded without hesitation. "Don't believe anything Sierra tells you." Hearing Sierra's name in the middle of the night felt like an alarm bell ringing in my skull. I turned my gaze toward the dark hallway. Everything was still, but I felt the air shift like the shadows themselves were listening. I forced myself to speak. "Who are you? Why do you know about my daughter?" There was a pause, long enough that I heard the ticking of the clock in the living room. Then the man answered, his voice low and final. the last person who saw Sam alive. The room seemed to fold in around me. I pressed a hand over my mouth to stop a sob from escaping. I had imagined many possibilities, but never this. Someone who had actually seen Sam on that night, the night her life was swallowed by darkness. I swallowed hard, terrified to ask, terrified not to. "What do you want from me?" He breathed out slowly, the sound crackling through the speaker. "I want the truth to come out," he said. "Sierra is not who you think she is." And Sam found out something she shouldn't have. I clutched the phone against my chest, wishing I could steady my breathing. "If you really know something, tell me," I whispered. Instead of answering, a soft chime sounded. A message. "I've sent it," he said. "Look closely." I opened the image, and everything inside me collapsed. It was Sam, standing in front of an old brick wall, her face caught in a moment of fear, as if someone had just called her name. A dim yellow light highlighted her expression, making her look lost, confused, almost pleading. But it wasn't Sam that made my fingers go numb and the phone slip from my grip. It was the person standing right next to her. Sierra. Sierra in a picture taken only hours before Sam disappeared. My breath vanished. I grabbed the edge of the blanket to steady myself, but it didn't help. The room spun slowly, the weight of the truth pressing down on me. Sierra had been there. Sierra had seen Sam. Sierra knew something. The man's voice returned as if he could sense the moment the truth hit me. "Do you understand now, Evelyn? Sam didn't disappear on her own." I opened my mouth to ask more, but the line went dead. No goodbye, no breath, nothing. I sat there frozen in the darkness, the phone screen glowing with the image I could never unsee. Sierra beside Sam, Sierra present that night, Sierra tied to the truth I'd been searching for all these years. And just like that, the darkness inside me began to move. The photo Hale sent left me unable to trust anything I once believed about Sierra. I didn't sleep at all. I just sat there staring at the blurry image of Sam standing beside her under the fractured yellow light as if the moment itself had been trying to warn me years ago. Time in this house felt suspended, and every breath I took seemed heavier, tangled with fear and certainty. I knew I had to dig deeper, had to ask directly, had to confront what I'd avoided for so long. But I also knew Sierra would never volunteer the truth on her own. I wrote back to Hale. The message felt like it echoed into a tunnel. A few minutes later, he responded with a short, brutal sentence. "I told you." Sierra argued with Sam violently. I pressed a hand to my chest, feeling my heartbeat stutter. I tried to type another question, tried to steady my fingers, but they trembled too much, forcing me to inhale slowly just to keep going. The next morning, when Sierra walked past the kitchen, her eyes swept over me with a coldness that made my skin prickle. At that moment, I knew I couldn't wait any longer. I looked straight at her and asked, my voice no longer soft, "What do you know about Sam?" The room seemed to shrink around us. No TV, no dishes. Just two women facing each other, one hiding the truth, the other finally brave enough to ask for it. Sierra froze for a second, then slowly turned. She tilted her head, a slight mocking smile pulling at her lips. "Are you sure you want to know?" Her voice sliced through the air like a blade, soft but deadly sharp. I felt myself instinctively step back, not because of the volume of her words, but because of the intent behind them. Her eyes weren't the eyes of someone ignorant of the past. They were the eyes of someone who knew too much and enjoyed watching me unravel. Before I could answer, a faint sound came from the stairs. I turned and saw Caleb standing there, his hand gripping the railing. His face had gone pale. He had heard my question, and worse, he had heard Sierra's response. The way he looked at me told me he didn't know which side to believe, and the way he stepped back told me he wasn't ready to face any of this. Sierra glanced at him briefly before turning back to me, her smirk unfading. "You're overthinking things. Sam is old news." The way she said Sam's name, flat, dismissive, dead, sent a violent shiver through me. It felt like someone had reached into my chest and twisting something raw. As Sierra walked away, my phone vibrated. A new message from Hale. That was only the beginning. I sat down, gripping the armrest of the chair. If that was only the beginning, what awaited me in the parts I hadn't uncovered? It felt like I was standing at the edge of a cliff, and the next truth would be the push that sent me over. The phone buzzed again. A new audio file appeared with a message, "Sam left this." I tapped it, and when Sam's voice spilled into the room, my whole world cracked open. Her voice was shaky, thin, like she was whispering into her own hands or speaking from a place she didn't want anyone to find her. If I disappear, the person responsible? My heart clenched so violently I stumbled to my feet as if my body was trying to escape the truth before it reached me. But just as the sentence reached its breaking point, the recording cut off. The screen went dark. The file vanished. I tried to reopen it, tapping until my fingertips burned, but it was gone, erased, like someone had reached through the phone and ripped it away. I stood frozen in the dim light of the room, heart suspended between two uneven beats. Sam had been trying to tell me something. She had known something. She had been afraid. And someone did not want me to hear her final words. In that moment, I realized one thing with absolute clarity. A truth was falling toward me, and it wasn't going to land gently. Ever since hearing the cut-off recording, I no longer saw Sierra as merely difficult or manipulative. I saw her as a shadow moving through every corner of this house, something that did not belong, yet had wormed its way into every breath we took. I thought Sierra only knew something about Sam. I never imagined the truth would twist so violently that the floor beneath me felt as if it might split. I thought I was prepared for the next layer of truth. I wasn't. It began on a cold, dim night when I went to the living room to get some water. The small blue light from the door camera flickered strangely across the wall, blinking in a way that made me uneasy. I assumed the system was glitching, so I went closer to check. But when I opened the playback, the air in my lungs froze still. On the screen was Sierra, standing at our front door, near midnight, and the man facing her wearing a dark cap was him, Mr. Hale. I watched his hand rise and rest gently on Sierra's stomach, his touch sliding in a slow, possessive way, something no man would do unless he believed the life inside her belonged to him. It wasn't comfort. It wasn't reassurance. It was intimacy, real, dangerous intimacy. I stood there numb, hand pressing against my lips as if that pressure could hold my shock in place. A whisper escaped me before I could restrain it. "Dear God, Caleb," and my chest tightened painfully. My son, so gentle, so trusting, always trying to believe Sierra just needed love. But the woman in the video did not need love. She needed control. She needed a shield. And Caleb, my poor boy, had been the perfect shield for her. I rewound the footage this time, turning on the audio. Sierra's voice seeped through the speakers, soft but sharp. Weak men like Caleb are only useful. I felt my knees nearly give out. That wasn't just cruelty, it was intent, a declaration. Then Hale spoke calm as a surgeon making a cut. The baby isn't his. The cold inside me turned into something heavier, something deadlier. The blood in my veins felt like it stopped moving. I pressed my palm to the table to steady myself. The baby wasn't Caleb's. Sierra was carrying Hale's child, and Caleb had no idea. I watched Hale lean in close to her. Sierra tilted her face and smiled a smile she had never once shown inside this house. A smile reserved for someone she actually wanted. Then she pulled him in and kissed him right there on my porch in front of the camera she clearly forgot or didn't care was there. That kiss sliced through me like a blade. For a second, the image blurred, and over Sierra's shadow, I saw Sam's terrified face from the photo Hale had sent, the same expression of a girl cornered by something she never expected. I don't know how long I stared at that screen. When I finally tore my eyes away, my phone buzzed. Another message. No sender name, just a link. My fingers shook as I tapped it open. The video was grainy, but I recognized Sam instantly, standing in the backyard, her face flushed with anger and fear. And opposite her, unmistakably, was Sierra. They were arguing, heatedly. Sam's voice rose sharply, captured by whoever had been recording. "You don't get to do that," she cried, her voice breaking. My legs collapsed under me and I sank into a chair. This was recorded right before Sam disappeared, and this was no longer a suspicion. Sierra was involved. She had been there. She fought with Sam, and Sam had been afraid of her. I stared at my phone as everything inside me slid downward into a cold, dark pit. Sierra hadn't just betrayed Caleb. She had touched Sam's life, and whatever she did was now unraveling piece by piece. I had been afraid for far too long. Ever since the night Sam disappeared, fear and grief had carved pieces out of me until I barely recognized the woman in the mirror. But after seeing Sierra kiss Hale in front of my house, after watching Sam argue with her in that grainy video, something inside me finally rose. Not rage, not madness, something sharper, resolve. I realized that if I didn't stand up now, the truth would be buried again, just like it was years ago. And this time, I would not let anyone bury it. The next morning, the moment Caleb and Sierra left for work, I began my plan. I reinstalled the entire camera system, moved the angles, added tiny recording devices in the corners of the living room, the kitchen, the hallways. I wasn't spying for curiosity. I was gathering proof. I needed the truth to speak for itself, and Sierra, sooner or later, would slip. Just 2 days later, cracks began to show. Sierra, normally so polished, started snapping at everything. Her heels slammed the floor with sharp, irritated clicks. She opened and shut cabinets repeatedly, unable to stay still. Something had gotten to her. She looked like a predator suddenly realizing someone else was watching. That same day, Caleb received a message on his phone. I heard the faint buzz, then the sound of him inhaling sharply. He walked into the living room, hands trembling, holding his phone up like it was a burning coal. "Mom, who did Sierra send this to?" On the screen was a message from Sierra to Hale, a message sent days earlier. "Caleb is weak and easy to use. All I have to do is push a little." My son stared at me, eyes wide and glassy with disbelief. I wanted to pull him into my arms, but I couldn't, not yet. What he saw today was only the surface. Late that night, my phone vibrated. A message from Hale. No explanation, no warning, just one sentence. "Tonight, you will hear the full truth." I pressed a hand to my chest to steady my breathing. I didn't know what he planned to reveal, but the tone in his voice, cold, steady, certain, made my skin prickle. I went to Sam's room and opened the old boxes again. Beneath a pile of brittle envelopes, I found a thick stack of papers. As I sifted through them, a folded document slipped out. I opened it, and the world around me seemed to drain of sound. A life insurance policy. The beneficiary wasn't me. It wasn't Caleb. It was Sierra Hayes. My fingers tightened around the paper so hard it crinkled. Why would Sam list Sierra? Unless Sam hadn't been the one who filled it out, or unless she felt threatened. My mind raced, desperate to connect the threads. Sam had discovered something. Sam had been frightened. Sam had died before she could finish her recording. I kept digging through the envelopes. Another sheet slid out, an email printout. Sierra had sent it to Hale. One line burned into my eyes. After his mother disappears. The sentence ended abruptly, cut off, but the meaning was clear enough to make my blood run cold. Sierra wasn't just angry. She wasn't just cruel. She was planning something, and she thought she had time. That evening, I sat at the dining table under the dim yellow light, the documents spread out before me, page after page, photo after photo, email after email. I printed everything, every line, every piece of proof Sierra thought she had buried. I wanted her to see it. I wanted her to understand that the woman she thought was weak, the woman she wanted gone, was no longer the prey in this house. When Sierra walked into the dining room carrying that same false confidence she always wore, I slid the stack of papers toward her. The pages fanned out across the table, stopping just inches away from her hand. The room fell silent. Sierra's eyes flicked down. And I, for the first time in years, looked straight at her without trembling. The game had shifted, and Sierra was about to learn that she was no longer the one in control. The dining room was drowned in a thick, suffocating silence as Sierra stared down at the pile of documents I had placed in front of her. My chest tightened with every breath, but for the first time in years, I didn't shake. Everything I needed to face her was right there. Photos, emails, recordings, messages. All the things she thought she had buried for good. Caleb stood behind his chair, no longer able to mask the trembling in his hands. When I handed from the tablet, the video began playing, the one with Sierra kissing Hale at our front door. Caleb's face drained of color, his fingers stiffening as though he might crush the device. I watched his eyes widen, his breath hitching. And when the video shifted to Sam arguing with Sierra, Caleb looked like the ground beneath him had vanished. He stepped back, leaning against the wall, voice cracking. "Sierra, what is this? What did you do to Sam?" It was the first time I had ever seen my son completely break. Sierra snatched the papers off the table and hurled them to the floor, her voice ripping out of her like an animal trapped in a corner. "You don't understand anything. None of you do." Her scream echoed off the walls, sharp enough to slice straight through the room. I rose slowly and walked toward her. No trembling hands, no weak heart, no fear anymore. I looked straight into the eyes of the woman who had spent months trying to erase me and said each word steady as steel. "You took my daughter. You will not take anything else." Sierra swallowed hard, stepping back. I saw her shoulders tremble, even though she fought to keep her expression defiant. But fear flickered, real fear. Before the air could settle, a heavy knock came from the front door. All three of us turned. The door creaked open, and there, stepping out from the same shadows that swallowed Sam years ago, was Hale. He stood tall, calm, his voice deeper and colder than the night behind him. Let me finish the last part. Sierra's breath tore out of her chest. She stumbled backward until her spine hit the edge of the dining table. "Don't say it. Don't you dare." But Hale moved forward, unmoved by her panic. His eyes carried guilt and finality, like a man who had held onto a truth that poisoned him for years. "That night, Sam discovered your secret." A silence fell so complete it felt like the air had been drained from the room. I heard my heartbeat pounding like distant drums. Caleb stood frozen, eyes red, torn between wanting to hear and dreading what was coming. Sierra gasped sharply, spun around, and fled the dining room. She shoved a chair aside, stumbled into the hallway, and bolted up the stairs as if something was chasing her. A moment later, her bedroom door slammed shut so hard the wall rattled. But what made my skin crawl wasn't her footsteps disappearing up the stairs. It was what she dropped while running. A small key, silver and worn, tied with a thin blue string. I bent down and picked it up. I knew it instantly. Sam's key, the one she always wore. The one the police said was found with her things when they concluded Sam had left voluntarily. But no, it was in Sierra's hands, not Sam's. I straightened, clutching the key so tightly the cold metal bit into my palm. Sierra had run, but in her panic, she had revealed the biggest truth yet, a truth Sam had tried to protect with her life. I stood there, breath shaking, knowing one thing with absolute clarity. The house was done hiding secrets. Sierra had cracked the final door open, and this time it would not close again. I stood in the middle of the living room, still clutching Sam's key in my hand. The house was so quiet, I could hear each beat of my own heart. Sierra was hiding somewhere upstairs, and Hale stood at the door, his presence heavy, as if he had carried this moment on his back for years. I knew this was it, the final moment. Everything would come out. There was no returning from this. Hale stepped inside, his footsteps echoing across the wooden floor like a slow, deliberate drumbeat. A coldness followed him, a coldness that seeped into the room and into me. Caleb sat on the couch, pale and trembling, his entire world cracking open before him. But he kept his eyes up, bracing himself for the truth. Hale looked at us, his voice low, roughened by guilt. I couldn't save Sam. I was too late. The words pierced me sharp as needles. I felt something twist painfully under my ribs. Hale's eyes glistened as if this confession had been locked inside him for far too long. Then he told us everything. Sam had discovered Sierra and Hale's plan. They weren't just cheating. They intended to take Caleb's assets, transfer documents, insurance forms, a plan so elaborate Sam had stumbled into it by accident. Sam confronted Hale, begging him to stop, but Sierra found out. A fight erupted between the three of them. And Sam was threatened. She ran into the night and Hale followed her, but not fast enough. My body trembled. Each detail felt like someone was scraping open an old wound that never healed. Sam hadn't disappeared because she was reckless or unstable. Sam disappeared trying to save Caleb. The wail of police sirens shattered the silence outside. Caleb flinched. Sierra had nowhere left to hide. The officer stormed upstairs. I heard her scream. Furniture hit the floor, something shattering. Then the metallic snap of handcuffs, final, cold, irreversible. Caleb watched everything, helpless, his face drained of warmth, his shoulders slumping, as though the weight of every lie Sierra told him had finally crushed him. I placed a hand gently on his shoulder. He was breaking, but inside that breaking was a kind of clarity he had needed for a long time. When the officers took Sierra out the door, she didn't look back, and for the first time, the house felt truly still. After they left, I returned to the cabinet, opening the drawer where I had hidden the photograph Sierra once threw away. I wiped it clean, brushing away the thin layer of dust from Sam's smiling face. Then I hung it back on the wall exactly where it had always belonged before everything shattered. Caleb approached slowly, tears gathering at the edges of his eyes. He took my hand, squeezing it like a child seeking safety. I'm sorry, Mom. I didn't see any of it. His voice cracked. He sounded as lost as the night Sam disappeared. I held him, feeling both his grief and his regret ripple through him. My phone buzzed. A message from Hale. Just one sentence. Sam wanted you to know she loved you. My breath hitched. I placed a hand over my heart, and the tears finally came, heavy years-old tears that had been locked inside me. I looked up at Sam's photo and whispered through the sobs, "Sam, I did it. I finally did it." But before my tears could even dry, the phone rang again. Another number. Unknown. No message, just a call. I pressed it to my ear. A strange man's voice, steady but grave, spoke on the other end. "Is this Evelyn Carter? I have new information about Sam." I froze. The house darkened around me, and I understood. This story was not over. Not yet.